In the year 1939, Dr. Vargas is on a Zeppelin, and he seems anxious about something. He calls out one of the delivery men and tells him to deliver a parcel to Dr. Jennings. Along with the parcel, there is a note in which Vargas states that he is being followed. Soon, Vargas and 5 other renowned scientists disappeared without leaving a trace. Polly, a well-known publisher, is trying to find out more about the disappearance of those scientists. She receives a package one day which includes a ticket to Radio City Music Hall to meet an anonymous person. Polly's boss often tells her to not get involved in this matter, as it can be dangerous for her too. Polly heads to the Radio City Music Hall, and she finds out that the man who called her there is Dr. Jennings, who is a research chemist. Jennings doesn't waste any time in telling Polly that he was one of the 7 scientists chosen to serve in a secret facility before the start of World War I. Jennings and the other scientists were told not to discuss anything that happened there and tell Polly that they were made to do terrible things. Before Jennings could leave, he informs Polly that the other scientists have gone missing and someone is responsible for their disappearance. Jennings believes that someone is coming after him now too. Upon asking who it might be, Jennings utters the name Totenkopf, completely frightened. Soon, sirens in the city go off, and the people of the city begin to disperse. Polly tells her boss to look more into Jennings and Totenkopf. Things begin to get stranger when numerous gigantic robots land in the city. The giant robots are prone to any attack, and shots fired by the city's police and other armed personnel. The authorities have no option but to call the city's hero, Sky Captain. Sky Captain is able to attack the giant robots with his strong fighter jet. Instead of leaving the area where chaos is being caused by the robots, Polly decides to stay and take photos for her next story to be published. Sky Captain shoots down one robot, and it almost fell on Polly. Luckily for her, Sky Captain was able to give Polly enough time to move out of its way. The giant robots receive a signal, and they fly back to the mysterious place they came from. Polly and Sky Captain used to be in a romantic relationship a long time ago. Later on, it was reported that the giant robots had appeared across several major cities around the globe, and it is still unknown where they came from. Sky Captain's real name is Joe, who returns to his airbase to find out more about where the robots came from. Joe has brought one of the giant robots he shot down earlier. The technology expert of the airbase and Joe's friend, Dex, informs Joe that the signal those giant robots received before leaving was traced, but he couldn't find out where it came from or who sent it. Joe tells Dex to look more into the damaged robot he has brought and what actually controls it. When Joe is in his office, he finds Polly there, who wants to involve herself in finding out where those giant robots came from and who Totenkopf really is. Joe and Polly separated from each other when a few years ago, Polly found Joe in a relationship with another woman, and Polly sabotaged Joe's plane on a different mission. Joe doesn't want Polly to be a part of all this as it can get dangerous. Dex persuades Joe to let Polly join as she may have information others don't. When Polly hands out the blueprint of the giant robots she received from Jennings a few hours ago, Joe decides to bring Polly on board. Joe also makes it clear that Polly won't photograph anything until he says so. Polly tells Joe and Dex that the only information she has on Totenkopf is that he ran a secret science facility outside of Berlin before the start of World War I. Joe and Polly head to the place where Jennings is residing. When they enter Jennings's place, they find several strange creations, including an elephant that has been shrunken in size. Polly and Joe find Jennings being attacked by a mysterious assassin. The assassin is able to fight off Joe and leaves hurriedly. Jennings hands Polly 2 vials and demands her to hide them as Totenkopf can't have them or something terrible could take place. Jennings dies soon after. Joe and Polly return to the base, which is now being attacked by ornithopter drones. Joe and Polly try to stop those drones through Joe's fighter jet. Dex informs Joe that a signal is coming from one of those drones, and that can be used to find out where these drones have come from. Joe and Polly follow that specific drone and the drones enter the city. The drones cause enough damage to the city, and just when they could wreak more havoc, Joe and Polly are able to get close enough for Dex to work out the signal and find where it is coming from. Before Dex could properly use a map to locate the origin of the signal, the mysterious assassin arrives with more gigantic robots, and they kidnap Dex. Joe and Polly arrive back at the base, and they encounter more giant robots. Joe fights those robots, but it's too late for him now, as Dex has been taken away. Regardless of him getting kidnapped, Dex is still a genius man, and before he was taken away, Dex secretly attached the piece of a torn map that has marked the location of Totenkopf on a steel bar. The signal was coming from Nepal. Polly still hasn't told Joe about the vials she received from Jennings. Joe and Polly meet Joe's old associate, Kaji, who has different maps that could fully show where Totenkopf's facility is located. Kaji is told by his men that a storm is coming toward them. Kaji's men lead him, Joe, and Polly to an abandoned mining outpost. Kaji's men have betrayed Kaji and have tricked Polly and Joe into a room full of dynamite. As they hold Polly at gunpoint, they demand Joe give them the 2 vials, but Joe has no clue what they are talking about. Polly takes out the vial from her pocket and hands them over to those men. Joe is disgusted to see that Polly kept those vials away from him as a secret. Polly lets Joe know that Jennings instructed her to keep the vials away from everyone so that Totenkopf doesn't get to them. Joe and Polly are locked in a room full of dynamite, which is later on set to fire. Before the room could explode, Kaji lets them out and all of them are exploded out of the mining outpost. Kaji and Polly pass out, and before Joe could too, he watches the mysterious assassin taking control of the vials. All three of them wake up in Shangri-La, and before the monk of that place could let them go, Kaji asks the monk if he is aware of Totenkopf. The monk, who gets alarmed just by the name of Totenkopf, takes Kaji and Joe to a man, who is the only living survivor of Totenkopf's experiment. Totenkopf made many people work at a poisonous mine many years ago, and only one man has been able to survive. That man tells Joe where Totenkopf is residing. For telling where Totenkopf is, the last living survivor asks Joe for something in return for this favor. Joe is horrified to see the physical state of the living survivor, and the living survivor asks Joe to end his misery by finishing him off for good. Most of Polly's camera's film was destroyed in the explosion, leaving her with only 2 shots that she could take. Joe figures out the exact location, but notices that his fighter jet is running out of fuel. Knowing he would need more help, Joe surprises Polly by landing his fighter jet on a massive Royal Navy flying aircraft carrier. Polly is in awe of the technology she has witnessed in this entire journey so far. Joe meets another one of his old associates, Frankie, who is the commander of the entire aircraft. Before Joe could explain the entire situation to Frank, the entire aircraft is attacked by more of Totenkopf's armed forces. Joe and Frank quickly work out the exact location of Totenkopf's secret facility base, and they come to know that it is located on an isolated island. Frankie also informs Joe that he and Polly would have to use an undersea inlet to reach that island, as that's their only way to the island. Joe, Polly, Frankie, and most of her men enter the sea with their advanced fighter jets that can be transformed into full-fledged submarines. Before Joe and Polly could enter the inlet, Totenkopf's armed robots, which are in the form of crabs, attack everyone. Luckily for them, Frankie's forces are able to fight the robots, allowing Joe and Polly to reach the island. Polly and Joe are baffled to witness mythical creatures, including the ones that resemble dinosaurs. Both of them are chased by a flying dinosaur-like creature, but both of them are able to protect themselves. This also results in Polly losing one of the 2 photograph shots that were left in her camera. While they try to enter Totenkopf's secret facility, Polly and Joe try to fix their broken relationship. Joe and Polly are bamboozled to see hundreds of flying robots loading animals and other essential items into a large rocket. Things change quickly when the robots are quickly attracted to Polly and Joe. The mysterious assassin has also found out that Joe and Polly have arrived. Before the robots could end both of them for good, Dex arrives in a flying barge with the missing scientist. Dex explains they have to stop the rocket before the eventual countdown. The scientists tell Joe that Totenkopf had given up on humanity many years ago and believed that humanity was doomed to extinction. Totenkopf later built this rocket as a vessel that would carry the building blocks of a new civilization outside of Earth. The vials Polly received from Jennings are named Adam and Eve, which are seeds of technological utopia. Dex and the scientists let Joe know that the rocket is about to leave the Earth, and once it reaches a certain altitude, the entire Earth would be incinerated. All of them reach Totenkopf's lair, which is guarded by Totenkopf's robot. Joe is able to put down those robots in a heroic manner. One of the scientists is electrocuted by the defense system of the lair, but Dex is able to deactivate it afterward. A hologram of Totenkopf appears, and everyone is surprised to learn that Totenkopf always hated humanity, and he plans to create a new civilization outside of Earth. When they enter Totenkopf's office, all of them are even more shocked to find the corpse of Totenkopf, who had passed away 20 years ago. His plan was still carried out by the robots he made. Dex tells Joe that the rocket can only be stopped from inside. Polly wants to go with Joe, but Joe tells her that it could be dangerous for her. Knowing Polly would resist Joe's command, Joe kisses Polly and knocks her out. Joe meets the mysterious assassin on the bridge to the rocket. Joe is no match for that assassin's combat skills. To his surprise, Polly arrives and knocks out the mysterious assassin from the back. They learn that the assassin was a robot too. When they enter the robot, Joe is having trouble stopping the rocket, but he eventually is able to override the system, stopping the rocket from going much higher. Joe and Polly escape in a mini-pod before the eventual destruction of the rocket. The animals that were present on the rocket also come down in separate pods. As Polly had only 1 shot left, she decides to capture the photograph of the hero of this journey, Joe. But Joe, laughingly, tells Polly that she forgot to remove the lens cap of the camera before taking his photograph.